Hello and welcome to the Performing Arts series brought to you by the Kennedy Centre and the Prince William Network. My name is Victoria Pritchard and I'm the moderator for today's programme. This programme is interactive and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of us later by using the 800 number or email address appearing on your screen. We hope to hear from you. This programme is based on the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of The Taming of the Shrew, which is currently playing at the Kennedy Centre. And I'd like to start by introducing you to the cast here today from the Royal Shakespeare Company. Playing Kate today, on my right, is Esther Ruth Elliott.
Hello.
Next to her is Simon Trinder.
Hello.
Beth Vyse, playing Bianca. And Bill Nash, on the end,
Hello.
playing Petruchio. For those of you who are not familiar with The Taming of the Shrew, here's a brief synopsis of the story. Baptista, a rich gentleman, has two daughters, Kate and Bianca. Bianca is a beautiful girl with many admirers, while Kate is bad-tempered, foul-mouthed, and nobody wants to marry her. Baptista tells Bianca's suitors that Bianca will not be allowed to marry until Kate, her elder sister, has a husband. The suitors agree that a husband must be found for Kate. Enter Petruchio. He is looking for a rich wife and agrees to marry Kate for her money. The plot now splits into two stories. Firstly, that of Petruchio trying to tame his new wife, while a second story unravels as Bianca's suitors disguise themselves and deceive each other in order to win her affections. Like all good stories, the ending is a happy one, with Bianca marrying the man she loves, while Kate ends the play as a reformed and obedient wife. Petruchio is triumphant. So I'd like to start by asking the studio audience here, do you like the play?
Yes.
What is it about the play that you like?
It's funny.
It's funny? Anything else? Yes. Can we just get a mic, sorry, to you?
The comedy, it's a lot of, different kinds of humor. It's got the physical humor, and it's got a lot of puns. So there's a lot of different stuff for everyone.
Good. Yes.
The changing of the costumes and characters disguising themselves as other characters is pretty interesting.
Okay, people pretending to be other people. Yep.
All the characters are very likable, especially some of the more comedic ones like Romeo and Biondella.
Okay, good. Do you relate to the characters in the play? Why?
Well, they're kind of larger than life. They're caricatures, and they don't really remind you of anyone you know, like just personally.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Let me turn to the actors. Is it fun to perform this play?
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. This particular production is very big and robust, very colourful and very, very energetic. It's what the young lady over there was saying about the comedy, physical and in the text, is I think really brought out by this production that we've brought here.
What's interesting about Taming of the Shrew is it's always very popular with audiences, isn't it? Of all the Shakespeare plays, it's very popular with audiences. Probably up there with Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet. Why do you think it is? Why do you think it's so popular with the audiences?
I think that you can look at the play on a lot of different levels, and I think sometimes a lot of people are quite interested in perhaps how the central characters, what they're going to do with the whole playing of the taming, and certainly, as you may know, Kate's, for example, final speech. What are they going to do with that final speech? So they sometimes come out of curiosity, I think, as much as anything else, to see if you're going to have a sort of a feminist slant, or are you going to do it kind of true to the Elizabethan era. So I think that's quite...
There's certainly a lot of different adaptations of this play, aren't there? There's lots of variations of concept and idea of this play, probably more or as much as plays like Midsummer Night's Dream, isn't there? People, interesting when I ask the audience, do they relate to the characters? I think people are reluctant to, because it can be seen as being a very sexist and outdated play with the way that Petruchio treats Kate. Do you think this is the case? I mean, do you think it's outdated?
It is sort of in its way of a man taming a woman, but you can look at it in lots of other ways, and you can kind of relate to... I mean, we can all relate to two sisters fighting, or, you know, brothers and sisters, and the rivalry between the two, and how when you come to a relationship, you have to find a compromise. You meet two people at the same level, and I think it's got that in it, although he sort of tames her. She sort of lets go a bit of her aggression, so she can be loved, you know, slightly. I mean, it's very sort of, you know, ambiguous whether they fall in love or she's tamed or things like that, but there's a lot in it, I think, that you can relate to with everyone's relationships.
Yeah, and certainly I think the sisters is very true, isn't it?
I mean, there's a lot of critics who feel it shouldn't be done, that it shouldn't be performed, just because that, you know, that it is central. There is this sort of centrally misogynistic thread running all the way through it.
I was going to ask, what do you think the difficulties are of it as a play? Do you think
it's principally that. I mean, I think in the 16th, 17th century, wife beating was sort of a bit of fun. It was something that would have been socially crushing women would have been socially acceptable, and all the players would have been male, and the bulk of the audience would have been male. So you can just imagine a bunch of blokes standing around in the Globe, sort of like yeah, like that. But obviously you can't do that these days.
So I mean, it was written very much for obviously the Shakespearean audience, wasn't it? And so you're saying that you think that the audience then would have understood that side and responded differently to the audience.
Whereas today, I think like the idea of starving your wife or depriving her of sleep, or you know, all the other tricks he gets up to, are probably frowned upon, I'd have thought. So.
Okay. Well, today we're going to look at 3 scenes from the play: the sisters scene with Kate and Bianca, the wooing scene where Kate and Petruchio first meet, and Kate's final speech of the play. Although we'll be talking specifically about Taming of the Shrew, we hope that you'll find a lot of what we say is applicable to many of Shakespeare's other plays. So let's begin by asking Kate and Bianca to do that first scene. This is Act 2, Scene 1 of the play, and it's the first time that we see the sisters together.
Good sister, wrong me not, nor wrong yourself, to make a bondmaid and a slave of me. That I disdain. But for these other goods, unbind my hands, I'll pull them off myself, yea, all my raiment to my petticoat. Or what you will command me will I do, so well I know my duty to my elders.
Of all thy suitors here I charge thee tell, whom thou lovest best, see thou dissemble not.
Believe me, sister, of all the men alive, I have never yet beheld that special face which I could fancy more than any other.
Oh, minion, thou liest. It's not Hortensio.
If you affect him, sister, here I swear I'll plead for you him myself, but you shall have him.
Oh, then, belike, you fancy riches more. You will have Gremio to keep you fair.
Is for him you do envy me so? Nay, then you jest. And now I well perceive you have but jested with me all this while. I prithee, sister Kate, untie my hands.
If that be jest, then all the rest was so.
Great. Can I start by asking you, why is this scene so important in the play? It's quite a short little scene between the two of them, and yet it's probably one of the, you know, very famous scene from the play. Why is it so important?
I think it's the first time you see the two sisters on their own, and I think in public they have a very different sort of face, really. Well, not so much Kate, because she just is aggressive and very honest how she feels all the time, where I think Bianca plays this little princess sort of in public, and so everyone loves her and Daddy loves her and everything. But I think sort of in private they know each other and know really how to wind each other, and they're not, you know, not so nice and not what everyone else sees. So I think it's quite important to see that, because it looks quite black and white sort of from the first scene. She's the sweet one, she's the bad one. But I think, you know, that it never is black and white with sisters, and I think it's quite important to see that real
So you
relationship.
you get the detail, don't you, of the relationship and the characters.
And we'd kind of worked out that maybe, you know, Kate was actually, as being the first one, was actually probably quite adored to start off with. I mean, there's nothing to say that Kate's desperately unattractive. She makes herself look quite unattractive. But, you know, she's potentially could be, you know, as attractive as Bianca. And then obviously what happens is Bianca comes along and being the younger one sort of overtakes the role, and Kate's kind of wondering there where she sort of fits into it.
So how did you rehearse the scene? I mean, you've obviously got the problem of being tied up, which she says, untie my hands, so she's obviously is tied up. What did you do in rehearsals to get this dynamic between the two characters?
Well, in the space is much bigger, and it's sort of a lot of running around and screaming and wrestling, and then Bianca's actually tied to a door in the show, and we did all the physical stuff of how they would be together, and then we worked on the text separately, and then tried to mingle the two, because if you're too panicky and you lose all the words and stuff, so it was sort of a balance really between the physical side of the scene and then sort of the text.
So you worked them in two separate. So you did the physical first, and then the text, and put them together.
Brought them together and sort of played status games and tried to sort of play with maybe Bianca having much higher status in private within Kate, although when outside she's the sort of dominant one and things like that.
OK, I'd like to look a little bit about what we learn from these two characters and ask the audience, what, in that little bit of text, what do we learn about Kate and Bianca? Yes?
Well, one thing I liked about that scene is that for most of the play, it's really Kate and Bianca are very separate. Like, they go from Kate's with Petruchio and Bianca with her suitors. But this is one of the very few scenes where they're together and they're interacting with each other, and that's, I think, really important to the dynamics of the rest of the play.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's what you just said, isn't it? It's really establishing the difference between them in public, either in their own individual lives and stories, or in public with their father, and the two of them in private. Anything else we learn?
You can not only see the difference between the sisters in public and private, you can also see the difference between the sisters themselves. Like, you get a good sense of how they are and how they act, just with each other, and what their nature is.
What do you see about their nature? What?
Well, you can see that. Bianca is well liked, and also seems sometimes that Kate is maybe a little jealous, or is just agitated by how much probably attention she gets.
Okay, that's quite an interesting point.
It's interesting, that's a good point actually, because this scene is not just about having a fight, it's clearly talking about the suitors, and why is Kate keeping on asking, trying to get some sort of a truth. Now, I don't think perhaps from how I feel that she's particularly interested in Hortensio, you know, herself, but the idea that she has got the interest.
And you want to know if she's acting as well.
Yeah.
You know, does she like those men, or is she just playing up to them? And, you know, you want to know what she's really thinking. I think.
But you mentioned the jealousy aspect. Now, this brings us to kind of choices that you make about characters within Shakespeare. There's nothing to say that because she's jealous, she's angry. Maybe the jealousy leads to her being more upset than angry. So I'd like to ask them to try and explore it like that, with Kate playing more the upset side of you know, the upsetness, the hurt that you feel if everyone fancies your sister, nobody fancies you. Actually, you know, that could be you could be quite tearful and sad about that. And with Bianca playing more of the anger and
getting. Yeah.
And looking at the status, when they do it, look at the status. They said they talked about status. Look at how the status changes when they do it.
Hopefully.
We'll try.
Thanks,
Good sister, wrong me not, nor wrong yourself, to make a bondmaid and a slave of me. That I disdain. But for these other gauds, unbind my hands, I'll pull them off myself, yea, all my raiment to my petticoat. Or what you will command me will I do, so well I know my duty to my elders.
Of all thy suitors here I charge thee tell, whom thou lovest best, and see thou dissemble not.
Believe me, sister, of all the men alive, I've never yet beheld that special face that I could fancy more than any other.
Minion, thou liest. Is it not Hortensio?
If you affect him, sister, here I swear I'll plead for you myself, but you shall have him.
Oh, then, belike, you fancy riches more. You will have Gremio to keep you fair.
It's for him you do envy me so. Nay, then you jest. And now I well perceive you have but jested with me all this while. I prithee, Sister Kate, untie my hands.
If that be jest, then all the rest was so.
OK, good. What do you notice? What changes when they do it like that? Yeah.
I noticed that I disliked Bianca a lot more in the scene.
You disliked Bianca a lot more in the scene, yeah. I mean, the status definitely changes, doesn't it? We certainly feel that we dislike Bianca. We feel much more sympathetic towards Kate, yeah? OK, lovely, thank you. We're going to move on now to the Kate and Petruchio scene, which is also from Act 2 and Scene 1. And this is just after Petruchio has agreed that he will marry Kate, having never met her. And this is their first meeting.
Good morrow, Kate, for that's your name, I hear.
Well, have you heard, but something hard of hearing. They call me Catherine that do talk of me.
You lie, in faith, for you're called plain Kate. And Bonnie Kate, and sometimes Kate the Cursed. But Kate, the prettiest Kate in Christendom. Kate of Kate Hall, my super dainty Kate. For dainties are all Kates. And therefore, Kate, take this of me, Kate of my consolation. Hearing thy mildness praised in every town, thy virtue spoke of, and thy beauty sounded, yet not so deeply as to thee belongs, myself am moved to woo thee for my wife.
Moved? In good time, let him that moved you hither remove you hence. I knew at the first you were immovable.
Why, what's a movable?
A joined stool.
Ah, thou hast hit it. Come, sit on me.
Asses are made to bear, and so are you.
Women are made to bear, and so are you.
No such jade as you, if me you mean.
Alas, good Kate, for knowing thee to be but young and light, I will not burden thee.
Too light for such a swain as you to catch, and yet as heavy as my weight should be.
Should buzz.
Oh, well ta'en, and like a buzzard.
Oh, slow-winged turtle, shall a buzzard take thee?
Aye, for a turtle as he takes a buzzer.
Nay, come, in faith, ye wasp, you are too angry.
If I be waspish, best beware my sting.
My remedy is then to pluck it out.
Aye, if the fool could find it where it lies.
Who knows not where a wasp does wear his sting? In his tail?
In his tongue.
Whose tongue?
Yours, if you talk of tails, and so farewell.
What, with my tongue in your tail? Nay, come again. Good Kate, I am a gentleman.
Oh, that I'll try.
I swear I'll cuff you if you strike again.
So may you lose your arms. If you strike me, you are no gentleman, and if no gentleman, why then no arms?
A herald, Kate. Oh, put me in thy books.
What is your crest? A cock's comb?
A combless cock, so Kate shall be my hen.
No cock of mine. You crow to like a craven.
Nay, come, Kate, come. You must not look so sour.
It is my fashion when I see a crab.
Why, here's no crab, and therefore look not sour.
There is.
Then show it me.
Had I a glass, I would.
What, do you mean my face?
Oh, well aimed of such a young one.
Now, by St. George, I am too young for you.
Oh, yet you are withered.
'Tis with cares.
I care not.
Nay, hear you, Kate. In sooth, you scape not so.
I chafe you if I tarry, let me go.
No, not a whit. I find you passing gentle. 'Twas told me you were rough and coy and sullen, and now I find report a very liar. For you are pleasant, gamesome, passing courteous, but slow in speech, yet sweet as springtime flowers. Thou canst not frown, thou canst not look askance, nor bite the lip as angry wenches will, nor hast thou pleasure to be cross in talk, but thou with mildness entertainst thy wooers, with soft and affable conversation. Why does the world report that Kate doth limp? Oh, slanderous world. Kate, like the hazel twig, is straight and slender, and as brown in hue as hazelnuts, and sweeter than the kernels. Oh, let me see thee walk. Thou dost not halt.
Go, fool! And who now keeps command?
Did ever Diane so become a grove as Kate this chamber with her princely gait? Be thou Diane, and let her be Kate. Then let Kate be chaste and Diane sportful.
Where did you study all this goodly speech?
It is extempore, from my mother wit.
Witty mother, witless else her son.
Am I not wise?
Yes! Keep you warm.
Marry, so I mean, sweet Catherine. In thy bed. And therefore, setting all this chat aside, thus in plain terms, your father hath consented that you shall be my wife, your dowry agreed on, and will you nill you, I will marry you. Now, Kate, I am a husband for thy turn. For by this light, whereby I see thy beauty that doth make me like thee well, thou must be married to no other man but me. For I am he am born to tame you, Kate, and bring you from a wild Kate to a Kate conformable as other household Kate. Here comes your father. Never make denial. I must and will have Catherine to my wife.
Great. OK, I'd like to ask the audience, first of all, obviously that scene kind of moves through different stages as it goes through, but looking at the beginning of the scene, what's the language like in the beginning of the scene? We have a microphone?
In the beginning of the scene, the language seems to be just kind of small talk, just frivolous. They're just getting to know each other. And I thought that although Kate, she was still kind of rebellious, Petruchia was already sort of getting the upper hand, it seemed to me.
So there's definitely a sparring dialogue, isn't there? It's definitely, I mean, it's an argument. But what kind of words does Shakespeare use? Yes? Yes.
I find the speech kind of, in a way, it's kind of like a child with kind of playing back and forth with the sting and removing it and fool, and it seems very childish, and then eventually they get kind of more to a little bit of an adult talk, and then she gets kind of soft, and all of a sudden they just start to wrestle, and it's very different, going like up and down with the emotions coming out and the language. It just varies a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning bit, the language is very punchy, isn't it? It's very, you know, batting. It's like batting a ball backwards and forwards between them. But let's look at what they feel, not what they say, but what they feel. What's going on? What do they feel in that scene?
Well, you can tell at first that Petruchio is trying to woo Kate, and Kate is not going to have any of it, but eventually they start to like each other, or so you assume from the way that they approach each other and talk to each other. And then all of a sudden when Baptista is coming, he gets back into his pompous sort of character, which is interesting.
Yeah. So in really simple terms, what do they, well, let's ask the actors, what do they feel in this scene?
Well, I think that young lady got it right. For me, anyway, is you're absolutely right. Coming in, and obviously I don't want to, as Kate, be here. I've been thrown in, you know, by my father and expected to sort of do something with this sort of individual. And so for her, I think it's a kind of a surprise that actually she finds herself, you know, 3 minutes down the route and she's still there. You know, and what am I doing still here? But because the scene has got such an energy, because of its pace, she's kind of swept in this whirlwind before she knows it. And the physical kind of language really helps that, because, you know, she could start screaming and get herself out of it, but it's that sort of slightly playful, slightly physical type of, you're not quite sure what's going on in that rough and tumble, but it certainly kind of affects them both, I think.
I mean, I think what's important is that if she came in and walked out again, there would be no play. And if she came in and fell in love with him and he fell in love with her and they got married happily ever after, there'd be no play. So what this scene sets up brilliantly is that kind of conflicting thing between what people are saying and what people are feeling and the subtext of what's going on, that actually, as Esther says, she has been thrown into this room and she doesn't want to be there. But there certainly has to be something that keeps both of them there. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, with Petruchio, it's partly the money. Because the previous scene to this has been a discussion of the dowry. But there has to be some kind of attraction. Otherwise, if there's no attraction, the play doesn't work, I don't think, anyway.
OK.
There was a quote in one of our reviews the other day from a Washington journalist who I thought hit it right on the head with, it's like watching a very bad blind date. It's all the way through the play, which I thought was completely spot on. Two people who kind of like each other, but they've got their issues. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it's like.
Yeah. So let's try and play with that. Can we just do the top of the scene? But can we do it this time that Kate actually wants to get out of the room?
Okay.
So physically trying to remove herself from the space.
Okay.
Okay. Good morrow, Kate, for that's your name, I hear.
Well, have you heard, but something hard of hearing. They call me Catherine that do talk of
you
me.
lie in faith, for you're called plain Kate, and bonny Kate, and sometimes Kate the Cursed. But Kate, the prettiest Kate in Christendom, Kate of Kate Hall, my super dainty Kate, for dainties are all Kates, and therefore, Kate, take this of me, Kate of my consolation. Hearing thy mildness praised in every town, thy virtue spoke of, and thy beauty sounded, yet not so deeply as to thee belongs. Myself am moved to woo thee for my wife.
Moved in good time. Let him that moved you hither remove you hence. I knew you at the first, you were immovable.
Why, what's a movable?
A joined stool.
Ah, thou hast hit it. Come, sit on me.
The asses are made to bear, and so are you.
Women are made to bear, and so are...
All right, thank you, thank you. What do you notice that's different with when they do it like that? Yes.
Well, I didn't think that way is quite as interesting because it's very straightforward. Like, she just doesn't want to be there and he wants to keep her there. There's no really undertone. It's just very straightforward.
Absolutely. It kind of loses its subtlety, doesn't it? We just get one dimension of this relationship. When she's trying to get out of the room, we only see one side of Kate and Petruchio. We lose the subtlety. Anything else? Yes?
It moves a lot faster as well. It is much simpler, but it does open up other things. Like you can just see how deep her Kate's aggression goes. Like she really doesn't want to be there, but you can see how much she doesn't want to be there. She just forcefully tries to get out of the
definitely.
room.
Or the energy. I think you say it moves faster. We would call it the energy of the scene, and I think that works, doesn't it? The energy is really good. I mean, did you try doing it like that when you rehearsed it?
Tried all sorts of different things.
And did you find that, as this guy says, that you actually got other things out of it by doing it like that?
Yeah, I think so. And we also kind of worked it where we can't obviously in here, but sort of doing it from a distance, a distance from each other, and kind of seeing what that sort of set up, and then going to the other extreme of really liking each other.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you to do now. Right. Can we just do that beginning bit again? But this, or you can pick it up from where you left off. It's up to you. Or the beginning. But we're going to play the opposite extreme now. So this is what they really feel. This is the desire and the intrigue that is keeping them in that room. But we're going to play that as a really obvious subtext.
Okay. Good morrow, Kate, for that's your name, I hear.
Well, have you heard, but something hard of hearing. They call me Catherine that do talk of me.
You lie in faith, for you're called plain Kate, and bonny Kate, and sometimes Kate the Cursed. But Kate, the prettiest Kate in Christendom, Kate of Kate Hall, my super dainty Kate, for dainties are all Kates. And therefore, Kate, take this of me, Kate of my consolation. Hearing thy mildness praised in every town, thy virtue spoke of and thy beauty sounded, yet not so deeply as to thee belongs. Myself am moved to woo thee for my wife.
Moved? In good time. Let him that moved you hither remove you hence. I knew her at the first, you were immovable.
Well, what's immovable?
OK, good. Thank you. What do you get from watching it like that? Yes.
Well, it lost a lot of the conflict. They thought something and they said it. They were still hiding a little because the words still just, insinuate those things. But they were just, saying exactly what they feel. So you didn't feel the tension. They were just, it was very plain.
Yeah, you certainly didn't feel the tension. But what did you feel? What did you feel? Was there anything that you felt more of than when we watched it the first time?
Well, there still was, like in the first scene they did, you could still see that they were interested in each other. But this time it was even more, and it was actually really interesting to see, how the aggression was kind of taken away completely, and it was such a very vital part of their characters. So once it was gone. It was
absolutely.
really
You start to see much more the subtleties of the characters as well. Did you hear the language in the same way, or did the language sound different that time? Yes? On the front here. Just quickly with the mic.
I believe that the language very much contradicted their feelings and emotions, because you could tell that her eyes were deeply looking into his, but her words were a completely another side of her that was not visible through physical movement or visually what we can see going on. Their words do not match at all.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point, that the text tells us so much about how to play a scene. Within that, we need to explore the subtleties and the more intricate details of the characters and the relationships, but you always have to be true to the text. Would you?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a lot of it's a lot of actual direction is in the writing itself. There's a line for by thy beauty, and that sort of repetition suggests that maybe that's the first time that Petruchio sees her properly. It's this thing of I see thy beauty, as if it's a surprise. And there's other parts of I can't think of any off the top of my head, but other parts of the play where the same thing happens.
But if you played it like that, would no one be tamed? If like that one said, there'd be no play.
No, no, but it's just that moment, because all through the play you have these moments where Petruchio suddenly sort of like drops his guard, and then it instantly comes back up again. And I think that's one of them. There's another bit in the wedding scene where he talks to the audience about if to well for Kate, if I could change these poor accoutrements, if I can change myself as I can change these poor accoutrements, 'twere well for Kate and better for myself. And that's, again, dropping his guard to the audience.
And also, there's a clue in who gets to say what and how much they say. In this scene, for once, Kate her language is quite, reactionary. It's 1 lines, 2 lines at the top, whereas Petruchio gets all that, sort of dialogue. So you kind of feel he's kind of initiating quite a lot of it, partly because he needs to, like you say, because of the whole money thing. He's got an objective, a very strong objective, and he sort of can't leave the room either until, he's kind of got somewhere. And so she's only got these 1 lines, and other times obviously she's got a lot more to say, but in this it's 1 line, it's kind of all happening to her.
Yeah, okay, all right, fantastic. Let's ask Kate now to do the final speech. Now this is right at the end of the play. The shrew is tamed, and this is Kate. What happens is the other husbands all call their wives, all claiming that their wives are the most obedient, and none of the wives come except for Kate, who comes and proves that she is the most obedient wife of all.
Fie! Unknit that threatening and unkind brow, and dart not scornful glances from those eyes, to wound thy lord, thy king, thy governor. It blots thy beauty as frosts do bite the meads, confounds thy fame as whirlwinds shake fair buds, and in no sense is meet or amiable. A woman moved is like a fountain, troubled, muddy, ill-seeming, sick, bereft of beauty, and while it is so, none so dry or thirsty will deign to sip or touch 1 drop of it. Thy husband is thy lord, thy life, thy keeper, thy head, thy sovereign, one that cares for thee, and for thy maintenance commits his body to painful labour both by sea and land, to watch the night in storms, the day in cold, whilst thou liest warm at home, secure and safe, and craves no other tribute at thy hands but love, fair looks, and true obedience, too little payment for so great a debt. Such duty as a subject owes a prince, even such a woman oweth to her husband. And when she is froward, peevish, sullen, sour, and not obedient to his honest will, what is she but a foul contending, rebel and graceless traitor to her loving lord? I am ashamed that women are so simple to offer war where they should kneel for peace, or seek for rule, supremacy and sway, when they are bound to serve, love and obey. Why are our bodies soft and weak and smooth, unapt to toil and trouble in the world, but that our soft conditions and our hearts should well agree with our external parts? Come, come, you froward and unable worms, my mind hath been as big as one of yours, my heart as great, my reason haply more, to bandy word for word and frown for frown. But now I see our lances are but straws, our strength as weak, our weakness past compare, that seeming to be most, which we indeed least are, then veil your stomachs, for it is no boot, and place your hands below your husband's foot, in token of which duty, if you please, my hand is ready. May it do him ease.
Fantastic. This, Esther said at the beginning, when we were talking right at the beginning, about this, the difficulties that are faced by the actor, by the director, by the audience about this final speech. Because Kate has a choice in this final speech. The production has a choice. Does Kate really believe what she's saying? Is she genuinely submissive? Is she being ironic and sarcastic? There's been a production that was done in the UK where she was completely mad. Petruchio had actually driven her mad. And this final speech was her, like, you know, she needed to be locked up. What do you think the choices that Esther's... What choices Esther made about this?
Well, it seems like she hasn't really been tamed. She seems like this is how she wants to be, in a way. Like, all her aggression before was really just how she was feeling then, but this is really how she feels now.
Do you think she believes what she's saying?
Yes.
When you listen to that speech, do you feel that she believes what she's saying? Yeah. Esther, what were your thoughts about rehearsing this?
Well, I'm glad that gentleman said that. I did believe that my theory was that she actually does believe it by the end, because she goes to great lengths in a very public environment. I mean, I know that's partly, you know, the setting of the play, how it's structured, but she's given the time, and she takes the time, particularly with those two women, having observed how they are and how their relationships, the Bianca relationship is perhaps not a very strong one. I don't know what you think about that at the end. It's built on kind of shady foundations, and the widow and Hortensio, and I think she sees that, and I do actually think that one of the things is that she loves Petruchio. Now, when she goes into the Taming school, she's not quite sure what it is all about, and she's led by it all. But I think that she is released, something is released in her, and I actually believe that she is prepared to do that, and finds a strength in actually being a sort of good, dutiful wife. Whatever happens after the play is another thing, but certainly I think that by this point, for me, I think that she does, because she uses such emotive language. She goes to such trouble to say, you know, is like a fountain troubled. You know, she's kind of doing a kind of bit of a rallying call to the women, you know, if anything else.
She certainly reiterates an idea over and over again, doesn't she? She uses not one, you know, thy husband is thy Lord, thy life. She builds on it to really show her feeling.
Certainly in the production, you know, you can include different parts of the speech can be done to different people. Like, for example, you know, she might be saying, my mind has been as big as one of yours, my heart is great, my reason haply more. And I think what she's saying there is that, you know, she's had quite a difficult time and her father hasn't always known what to do with her, hasn't always been over fair to her. And she's kind of saying, that's all right, I'm aware of all these things now, and, you know, I'm sort of saying to you, this is what's happened to me, but I'm sort of going to let it go.
How much of the choice of how that final speech is played is down to the director and the production, and how much is down to the actor?
Well, obviously, you hope it's going to be down to the actor, but it's one of those speeches, I don't know what you think about this, that's often people kind of look at that first and then work backwards from the play, as in, what is your take on that last speech? What is therefore your take on the whole thing? And, you know, if I play it very kind of, you know, submissive, then, you know, what does that say? And so I think obviously the director has his idea, and certainly in this one he does feel that it's a love story, a very kind of complex love story, but it is a love story, and that's, you know, perhaps is a slight awakening in Petruchio, that, though I won't speak on behalf of someone else's role, but yeah, I think...
Can we just try the beginning bit and play the irony? So we're gonna have her that she doesn't believe what she's saying at all. All right, she's been beaten into making this final speech, if you like. She doesn't have the same belief about what she's saying, but she's saying it purely by being sarcastic and ironic.
Fie, fie! Unknit that threatening, unkind brow, and dart not scornful glances from those eyes to wound thy lord, thy king, thy governor. It blots thy beauty as frosts do bite the meads, confounds thy fame as whirlwinds shake fair buds, and in no sense is meet or amiable. A woman moved is like a fountain troubled, muddy, ill-seeming, thick, bereft of beauty, and while it is so, none so dry or thirsty will deign to sip or touch one drop of it.
Okay, good. Okay, what did you get from that? What do we see from that?
I wasn't really going to say anything about the second one. I just wanted to say on the first way you acted it, as much as I'm against the whole serving your husband thing, the way you acted it was very convincing. I think it just, the way you could put it out, the energy that you gave from it.
Do you think it would have, because of the production is set in an Elizabethan time, which in some senses can also give you a clue by the way where they've set it. You know, if we'd set it in the kind of, you know, the 1990s, I wonder whether there'd have been a different, you know, approach to actually that speech, and the fact that it's Elizabethan might have kind of helped the decisions that they made to that.
I think that's a very good point that you raised, and I'd like to sort of move on with that point as a summary, which is that I think we get a greater sense of Kate's journey when she believes what she's saying, and we can think, oh, that makes it really, you know, sexist and outdated, as we talked about at the beginning. But actually, what we get is that real kind of learning curve that Kate has in her life. Okay.
You get the sense from that she believes in what she's saying in speech. It kind of reveals that all the anger and aggression at the beginning of it was just kind of a cover-up for something else.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I'd now like to invite our viewers to start calling in, if you just want to take a seat, with any questions that they've got. The phone number is 1-800-672-0067, or you can email your questions to pwninfo@aol.com. Let's hear from you. OK, we're going to start with I think we've got an email question to start with, which is here. How is this performance of Taming of the Shrew different than how it would have been performed in Shakespeare's era?
Well, we've got women in ours to start with. There was in Shakespeare's day, there was no women allowed on stage. It was the law. So I suppose the likes of me, who look quite young, might be playing a girl, Kate or Bianca.
You don't look that young.
Not anymore. Not at this time of the morning. But yeah, so that's a massive difference. There'd be no set. Particularly in those days. The costumes, I'm sure, would have been fantastic, but that would have been their sort of everyday clothes, really. The music wouldn't have been as sumptuous as the sort of thing that we're used to. That's my...
I think lighting makes a big difference. If you're at the Globe and you're on stage, you can see the audience, whereas like if you're on a Pross Arch or like the Kennedy Centre, the lights, when the lights go down, that's it. You can't really see the audience, so you don't really interact. So it makes it... I think that's the main difference for me.
Well, I think it's the acting.
The engagement with the audience and the style of acting, of course.
Because it won't be like us. I mean, we're making psychological backgrounds for our characters, you know. Bianca is all sweet because she does this. Kate does this because of this. In those days, they got the script maybe a week before. You learn your part and you learn your cue. And you hear your cue from the stage and you run on and you say your lines. So all that kind of... it's all, you have to do it all with the words and the text and how you go with your language. Because, I mean, now, like we do with film and, you know, we create so much psychological background before we even speak the words. In those days, there was none of that. You just came on and you gave it.
Or none that we know of, anyway.
Yeah,
well, you know that's how it was
You certainly wouldn't have had 8 weeks rehearsal.
No.
Yeah.
You'd have been given your part and learnt it and maybe run it through.
Maybe or maybe not.
And even then, and you're actually given your lines and the line before.
Yeah, that's it.
So you'd have to wait for your line. So there might be a massive speech and you're waiting and waiting and waiting. This is in Shakespeare's time. And suddenly you hear your line, you come in. That's all, because they couldn't afford to spend the time or the money on paper and stuff to give everybody a full script. So it must have been quite confusing.
And the audience probably... Oh,
sorry, I was going to say, have we got a question from the audience?
Yeah, my question is how... He was talking about the lighting, and I was wondering how, in general, how modern technology would affect how the play is viewed.
Massively.
Yeah.
Lighting just... The other two... One of the other shows that I was doing in Stratford, Measure for Measure, the set is basically a brick wall, and the lighting just changed. With modern lighting, you can create rooms and lines and just totally change. It's not just a question of illumination. It's projections on the back and all sorts of things. It's a huge tool, I think.
Yeah, focus on different parts of the stage, which you couldn't do, obviously, in an open-air theatre.
OK, another question from the audience. Pass the microphone again.
Oh, well, just kind of a point. From what I hear from you, it sounds that, like, in the Elizabethan time, theatre was basically tasteless. And
what do you mean by tasteless?
I get the feeling,
what do you mean by that?
like, you hear the play and all, but you don't see. There's not much visual, and it sounds like it's just kind of a smack-together thing to finish it.
Well, you just hit the nail completely on the head there, because in those days we'll find it in all sorts of different writings, like Samuel Pepys, who was a guy who wrote a lot of diaries during that time. He, or after that anyway, he went to hear plays, and people up until very recently went to hear plays, not to see them, because there wasn't so much, they could do visually necessarily. I mean, I'm sure they did fantastic things that we couldn't even conceive of, but it was very much about the words, and that's why we struggle sometimes to understand exactly what's going on, but they loved language, and that's what they went to do. Not Samuel Pepys, he was years afterwards, but he talked about that kind of thing, hearing plays, not seeing them. So I'm sure it was probably more amazing than anything you'll see these days.
Shakespeare writes very sort of bold stage directions, but when they are there, they're very, very specific.
Yeah.
Which suggests, I don't know, to me suggests that there wasn't a great deal of business on the stage. That anything that's written as a stage direction it's kind of like the spectacle of the show.
Yeah, yeah.
What's that one in the temp? Enter with a curious device.
I don't know.
It's when Ariel comes in.
Right,
In
yeah.
his first appearance is enter with a curious and so like it's
what
just
that is.
exactly.
It's weird.
OK, we've got another email question, I think. What are some of the reoccurring themes in Shakespeare's plays, and how does this reflect the time period?
Well, I suppose Measure for Measure is I don't know if any of you are familiar with that play, but that's quite a good one, certainly in doing it in Stratford at the moment, with the current climate, the whole idea of death, of capital punishment, of justice or injustice, those quite big themes, religion, faith, testing of faith,
Political cover-ups.
Yeah,
political
certainly
cover-ups.
war as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it was a brilliant. It's been quite a brilliant play to do, really, in the light of it. And we set that in the sort of 1940s time, didn't
Just at
we?
the end of the war.
Just at the end of the war, and that sometimes can be a good thing about doing stuff in the modern, in sometimes modern dress, to highlight those themes, depending on whether the director wants to make some sort of a social comment, which is.
Actually, I'd say Taming of the Shrews an atypical play, in that it's about that deep. There's no soliloquy. There's no real meditation or thought. Most of Shakespeare's plays, there's soliloquies where people express what they feel, or they're talking about complicated, abstract ideas, and in Shrew there's none of that.
Don't know, it can be, I think.
Like where?
Well, I just think the overall kind of love, the thing finding love for yourself.
It's a fairly. I'm not knocking it, but it's a.
Oh, you are?
It's a romantic.
And they
It
tend
took
to
me years to write
It's a romantic
I think
comedy.
Shrew tends to be people say they're going to do something and do it, say they're going to do something and do it. Whereas Hamlet and Macbeth and those kind of plays are much more people saying they're going to do something and talking about why they want to do it or why they feel the need to do it.
Kate and Petruchio, the whole central storyline is nothing like that. It's all, it takes them the entire play to realise what they want and need. So I think
I think it takes that for them to realise it, but they're not sharing that with the audience as much, I think, is what Bill's saying.
No, maybe not in that sense.
Your psychological journey isn't
as
whereas
shared.
Hamlet shares it all. Macbeth, he tells you, shall I, shan't I? We know all that sort of stuff.
OK, we've got another email question, again for the actors. How do you get past the language to understand the meaning of Shakespeare's words? I think that's a very good question, isn't it? A lot of people, especially when they're first exposed to Shakespeare, are so daunted by the language.
Well, what we did, sort of in rehearsals, maybe the first day, we'd get the text, and you'd read maybe 2 lines, and then we go, OK, let's translate that into what we think it means today. So, good sister, wrong me not, nor wrong yourself, to make a bondmaid and a slave of me. So, I mean, that one's quite kind of obvious, but if you look at it, to wrong me, I mean, we don't say that now, do you?
No.
You wronged me? What? But or look, please, sister, don't hurt me, and things like that. And you just look at how we might say it today, and it kind of will lift off the page again, I think, when you look at it.
Just to make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So we put the
and
entire
if we all do
thing...
it together, the cast do it together, and then you can all work out what, like, gauds and all that sort of stuff means jewellery, and, I didn't know that, and you look it up in a glossary, and as long as everyone knows, then you can...
The other really surprising, the thing that always happens is whenever people have come to see any of the Shakespeares that we've done, everybody says the same thing. For the first 5 or 10 minutes, they're just at sea. They don't... And then all of a sudden, it just suddenly drops in, and you hear it, and you follow it.
Yeah.
So it's actually a lot of it's to do with trusting the audience, that they're not stupid.
And also that I think Shakespeare language is very much split into what is important for progressing the plot and the action, and what is important for giving us information about the characters. And I think when people are first exposed to Shakespeare language, they think, I need to understand every single word because every single thing is relevant to the plot, and I'm going to lose my way if I don't. No. And actually, as people become more familiar with it through watching good productions, they realise that actually there's only a small amount of it that's necessary in order for them to understand the action, and all the rest of it is just language which is there to be enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, he fills so many of these speeches up with he goes off in so many different tangents. My love is like this, which is like da-da-da-da, which is like da-da-da. So you've got like 3 sentences about that one sentence, and then he starts on another idea. So it's not that every word is, but they are there to be enjoyed. Yeah, you're right.
OK, have we got another question? Oh.
You mentioned that the costuming was a very important part of the play. How do you guys convey the kind of costume changes of the characters disguising as each other? How do you convey that as actors and through costuming and such?
Look, in our show, we do it on stage. They swap costumes in front of the audience. Yeah.
So it's very clear.
So yeah.
So you have men undressing.
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Do you see
really
that as
nice.
like a very important kind of thing you have to show to the audience?
I think it does help because the plotline can get very complicated. And if we show them, look, when he says he's going to be disguised as Lucentio and Tranio, and you think, who are those, who are those? But if you see them physically change on stage, you go, all right, now I get that physically before I have to tune into everything else. And all the
I mean, I think this is probably quite easy. This Taming of the Shrew is quite an easy disguise play, isn't it? There are certainly plays that...
Oh, yeah, like 12th Night.
12th Night, absolutely, where there's so much disguise and so much swapping of people pretending to be somebody else. And, of course, certainly with a character like Viola, who would have been a boy playing a girl playing a boy, I think, you know, that makes it much harder, doesn't it? OK. All right, well, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank the students in the studio for being with us, from Brentsville High School and from Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And I would especially like to thank the viewing audience from across the country for tuning into the programme. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question today, you may contact the performers by using the email address on the screen. We'd love to hear from you and answer your questions. We would also like to invite you to visit the Kennedy Centre website at the addresses on the screen. There you'll find additional information about this programme and the Kennedy Centre's up-and-coming programmes, as well as other resources on integrating the arts into the curriculum. We would also like to hear what you think of the Kennedy Centre's Performing Arts series. So we're asking you to complete an electronic evaluation form at the address on your screens. This will help us to select topics and resources that you need to enhance your classroom experience. Please remember that our next Kennedy Centre programme will be on Friday, January the 16th from 11 to 12 noon Eastern Time, when Andes Manta will perform music of the Andes. We hope you can join us. Thank you very much for being with us, and we would like to finish with Biondello's speech from Act 3 of Taming of the Shrew, which is a great illustration of how the actor works with text and physicalisation to bring to life the difficult language of Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's a funny speech, this, because it's a very long list of horse disease names. I'm sure you read it in the play, and it was a challenge for me. So, why? Petruchio is coming in a new hat and an old jerkin, a pair of old breeches thrice turned, a pair of boots that have been candle cases, one buckled, another laced, an old rusty sword ta'en out of the town armoury with a broken hilt, and chapeless with 2 broken points. His horse, hipped with an old mothy saddle and stirrups of no kindred besides, possessed with the glanders, and like to Mose in the chine, troubled with the lampus, infected with the fashions, full of windgalls, sped with spavins, rayed with the yellows, pascure the 5-stock, spoiled with the staggers, been on with the bot, swayed in the back and shoulder shot, and near-legged before, and with a half-cheek bit and a headstall of sheep's leather, which being restrained to keep him from stumbling, but often burst in new repurbed knots, one girth 6 times pieced, and a woman's crupper of velour, which hath 2 letters for a name fairly set down in studs, and here and there piece with pack thread.
OK, thank you, Simon. OK, if you take a seat. I'd like thank you all again, and I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the actors for all their work today. Thank you very much.